Dom Pérignon did not invent champagne. An English scientist beat him by 35 years. A man working in London in 1662 figured out how to make a wine sparkle and submitted the method to the Royal Society. The French have been claiming credit ever since. The monk was real, his contributions were real, but the story on the label, most of it was invented by a marketing department 2 centuries after he died, and the lines on the map, the legal boundaries that make champagne impossible to produce anywhere else, those weren't settled until 1927, after riots, after arsons, and after a world war. This is the actual story. Welcome to French Gastronomy. Champagne sits at the northern limit of viable viticulture in France. We're talking about the edge. If you go further north, the grapes don't ripen. That sounds like a problem. It's a whole point. Cold temperatures slow the fermentation. The grapes develop a sharp, aggressive acidity. The kind that can't be engineered, can't be faked. It's what happens when the vines spend their whole lives fighting for warmth. And underneath all of it, chalk, pure ancient chalk, belemnite chalk, compressed marine fossils millions of years old, forming these rolling white hills in the Grand Est. That chalk does 2 things. It drains water perfectly so the roots never drown, and it reflects heat upward the ground, warming the grapes from below on days when the sky has nothing to offer. You know, the same chalk they quarried to build the Cathedral of Reims. The same material. The cathedral and the vineyard share the same ground. That's not just poetic detail, that's the identity of the place. The wine and the stone are the same exact thing. And it's in this corner of France, right here, that champagne became champagne. Not because anyone decided it, because the ground made it inevitable. (1662), London. A scientist named Christopher Merrett presents a paper to the Royal Society of London. In it, he describes exactly how to make wine sparkle. You add sugar and molasses to a finished wine. A second fermentation starts inside the sealed bottle. The carbon dioxide has nowhere to escape. You get bubbles. This is the méthode champenoise, the exact method used in every bottle of real champagne today. Christopher Merrett was English. He worked in London. He published this in 1662, 35 years before Dom Pérignon ever enters the story. So, who was Dom Pérignon? He was a Benedictine monk, cellar master at the Abbey of Auvier, the hills above Épernay. From around 1668 until his death in 1715, and by every account he was obsessive. He harvested in the cool morning hours before the heat of the day could accelerate spoilage. He blended wines from multiple vineyards, multiple villages, multiple grape varieties, building a consistent quality that no single vineyard could deliver on its own. This our real contribution, significant ones. The blending philosophy built is still the foundation of how non-vintage champagne is produced. But here's what the marketing never tells you. He spent most of his career trying to eliminate the bubbles. He considered them as defect. Secondary fermentation inside the bottle was unpredictable. Bottles exploded in the cellars, sometimes half a batch, sometimes more. Dom Pérignon wanted stable, still wine. The sparkling bottle we associate with his name was almost the opposite of his goal. Obviously, that nuance didn't make it onto the label. I am drinking stars. That line everywhere, on supermarket bottles, on gift sets, on advertisements, was invented in the late 19th century. over 150 years after Dom Pérignon died. A marketing creation, not a historical record. That's not a quote, that's a slogan. But the story of Champagne was never just about one monk. The kings of France were crowned at the Cathedral of Reims, right in the heart of the region, every coronation for centuries. At every coronation feast, the wine served was champagne. Pope Urban II, himself born in the Champagne region, declared the wine from the village of A the finest in the world. That was in the Middle Ages, you know. The reputation was centuries in the making before the Dom Pérignon was even born. By the 18th century, Champagne was the wine of European courts, of celebration, of everything worth commemorating. The great houses built their caves into the chalk. The blending tradition formalized. The name carried a specific promise. This wine, from this ground, made this way, which made the question of where that ground ended extremely, extremely important. 1908, the French government draws the first official legal boundary, and they exclude the Aube département entirely. The southern section of what had always been considered Champagne country. Growers who had farmed there for generations were told their wine could no longer use the name. The economic stakes were not abstract. A bottle labeled Champagne sold for multiple of what an equivalent wine sold for without the name. It was the difference between survival and ruin. 1911, the Marne growers riot. Not protest, riot. Cellars are set on fire, military troops are deployed to restore orders, the Aube growers retaliate. And came the war, the actual war. The chalk hills of Champagne, those same hills, became the front line of World War I. The underground chalk cellars that had stored wine for centuries were turned into bunkers and field hospitals. The region was shelled for years. When the dust cleared, the boundary question still had no answer. 1927, the final map is drawn. Under political pressure and hard compromise, the Aube is included. The lines that define what can legally be called Champagne today were settled after riots, after arson, after a world war. And the fight is still going, you know. Today, international trade courts handle cases from the United States, from Russia, from China. Producers who want to use the word champagne on their labels, they cannot, even if the method is identical, even if the grapes are the same varieties, even if a blind tasting cannot tell the difference. The name belongs to the place. That was decided in 1927, and every court since has upheld it. So, what are you actually drinking when you open a bottle? 3 grape varieties dominate the whole appellation: Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier. A single non-vintage cuvée from one of the great houses can blend wines from 30 or 40 different villages, different soils, different exposures, different years, all assembled by hand to produce something that tastes consistent, vintage after vintage. There are more than 16,000 individual growers farming within the Champagne appellation. Every bottle, every single bottle, comes from within those boundaries drawn in 1927. On those chalk hills, in that cold. That chalk that drains the rain and reflects the heat and holds up the vines. It's the same chalk that is holding up the Cathedral of Reims. The wine and the stone, the same ground. So, Dom Pérignon didn't invent champagne. An Englishman documented the method in 1662, 35 years earlier. The monk real contribution was subtler and honestly more impressive. He built a blending philosophy, a discipline of quality, a culture of the cellar that still defines how champagne is made today. The drinking star quote, invented by a marketing campaign 150 years after his death. The legal boundary, settled after riots, fires, and a world war. If any of that surprised you, and obviously I'm betting it did, drop it in the comments. What did you think you knew about champagne that turned out to be wrong? And if you want more of these, the actual stories behind French food and wine, the ones that don't make it onto the label, subscribe. New video every week.